So what you're going to hear me talk about next is messages matter because you can't make anything happen without a great message. And again, you guys know that. That's why you're part of this tribe. And part of the reason that messaging is an active leadership is that messaging creates tribes. Another reason that you need to view messaging as an active leadership is because messaging also creates resistance. And that's the truth. Right? Look at that poor little guy, right, trying to move this guy. So messaging creates resistance. What do I mean when I say that? Well, so imagine that you're here, right? This is you. And you've done some work maybe with us, right? Where we helped you come up with this great, wonderful new message that you want to get out to the world. Maybe you've done this on your own and created your own message. You now have this wonderful message that you want to get out to customers and prospects, right? So you've got this great message, and you want to take this message and get it out to these folks. And that's awesome, right? All you need to do is take this message to these folks. The challenge is it's not quite as simple as that, right? Because you're going to depend on some others to help you move that message. So who else are you going to depend on? We're going to depend on sales, right, to help move that message. You're going to depend on people in development to help reinforce and keep the message alive. You might rely on some engineers to help keep that message going and get it out to these folks. You might rely on support people to get it out, and others, right? There's this whole group of folks. And what you can do, what happens sometimes is people think, I've got this great message. All I need to do is share it with these people, and they're going to start running with me, right? I'm going to just hand them this new message, and then they're going to run with me. For those of you who have tried it, is that how it works? No, right? Oftentimes, it does sometimes, right? And that's great and glorious when it happens, but it doesn't happen every time. In fact, oftentimes, what happens is these folks that you think should be on your team actually resist the message. And what you're hearing from us is not that then means you need to give up. What you're hearing from us is you just need to anticipate that, and when you anticipate it, think, how are you going to address it? Because it's all addressable. And it's worth it. So what are the top 3 causes of resistance? One of those is status quo bias. That is a fancy consulting term for the fact that people don't like to change, right? They'd like to just stay in the place they are. Another reason that you have resistance is misaligned incentives. And the third thing is a lack of belief in the message. And what you're going to hear me talking about now is, how do you get past all those things? So the first thing you need to think about is why they should care. And what I'll tell you is too often when people have this message, so it usually starts with an initiative, maybe something at the top where somebody says, we need to make this change because our brand's not recognized in the right way, people don't think about it, etc. And then when the message goes to get rolled out and explain to salespeople why they need to make this change, what they're told is, we need to make this change because of general brand perception out there and what people are thinking. Guess what? If I'm the salesperson, that to me sounds like a personal problem for you. It does, right? It doesn't sound like my problem. Okay, so organizationally, maybe we have this brand perception problem, but I'm fighting the fight I'm fighting, right? Each and every day. So what you need to do is make the message be not about the corporation's needs, right? But as you're delivering this message, how can you make it about the salespeople's needs? So to give you an example of that, there was an organization we're working with recently in financial services. And as they were selling this, you need to make this change because you've got to sell the fact that they need to make this change. What they said was, if you look at what our messaging has been able to produce, only 8% of our revenue last year came from new customers. That's at 8%. But each of you has been quoted with 25% new customer revenue in this coming year. The messages you have today, you already know won't get you there. Right? You already know from the results you've got. And so you need to change. This is why you need to change. And here's the message moving forward. But does that make sense, folks? Right? You got to make the message about their needs, not about your needs to change. All right, so if you do those things, you start to cure for that problem of the status quo bias, which leads to the next challenge. And where this resistance in here happens. One more spot where you get between you and them this resistance, right? Where these folks are fighting you. And that's misaligned incentives. So here's the first thing you need to understand about salespeople. Salespeople are coin operated, right? I don't mean that in a bad way. I love salespeople. I was a salesperson for years, right? It's not a bad thing. You hire them because they care about incentives, right? You filter for that in the interview process. You want this. But what you need to keep in mind is then don't fight a commission plan. Another thing to think about in all of this is that commission isn't the only incentive. And what you see up here is a picture of a bonsai tree, if you're not familiar with it. My in-laws, they like to garden, they like to plant, and they like to do those things. They decided they were going to raise bonsai. They thought that would be a fun thing to do. So they decided they're going to do it. One of the things that's interesting about them, you're trying to get them to grow like that. They don't just start like that. They want to grow to the sun and get very bushy. That's what they want to do. So you have to keep working on them. So how do they work on them? They use wire to actually bend them in the direction they want them to grow. And if the wire is strong enough, it'll hold them in that spot. Sometimes they have to use rebar, right? It's just so tough to get it to bend. But the point is, incentives are like the sun, right? They naturally want to reach for that. But sometimes you can use other things to bend people the way you want to go. Years ago, I was working at a company that sold books to training centers, computer training books. And as salespeople, you made a ton of money doing it. They were high margin. And if somebody bought your books, they used them to train, they gave them to the students, they bought your books again the next month, and the next month, and the next month. And it was an annuity business. You closed one deal and it kept repaying for you. And it was a fairly simple sale. We had a new product we were coming out with. This is 1997, and we believed the internet was the future. So we created this product called Learn It Online. It was going to allow you to do online learning. I want you to remember, this is 1997, right? 56K modems were smoking fast then. And this is a time of high skepticism around what was possible on the internet, right? This was way back when. The challenge for us was for our salespeople. You couldn't get your goal by doing this, right? You just couldn't get there by selling this product. It was a hard thing to sell. It was technologically, there were risks, right? That you'd run into technical problems as you're trying to sell. And it was a one-time sale. There's no annuity, right? So you do all this work, it doesn't. And so I went to my team and I said, look, guys, you just need to know that not selling this product is unacceptable. You need to know that I'm looking for people who can sell it, and I'm going to applaud them. And by the end of this year, if you are one of those people who didn't manage to sell it, you're not going to keep this job. It's that important to us. I didn't have the chance to change the commission plan. It was too late in the middle of the year, right? But I could change their incentives. I could change the things they focused on, and that matters. But this last challenge is a lack of belief in the message. And what's happening really is they're dismissing it at a glance. And it's like my kids, right? I got little kids. You ever set something in front of them that they've never had before, and they say, I don't like it, before they ever tasted it? And you're like, what do you mean you don't like it? You haven't even tried it. I don't like it, it's green. No, you like green stuff, right? You like lettuce, right? You go through the whole list. I don't like it. I know I don't like it. I know I don't. I know I don't. I know I don't. I know I don't. Right? And then you finally get them to taste it, and they're like, this is the best food ever, right? And you're thinking, then why did we spend 20 minutes on this, right? Why is my food cold now? How did that work out? This seems unfair. And the point is, what you got to do is get people to actually try on the message. They're actually not going to believe it until they try it on. Period. So the point is, why are you hearing me talk about these things? Because you can get through them. You just need to think about it, right? And it helps to think about those things ahead of time. And why do you need to think about them? You need to think about them because messages matter. You need to think about them because they're important. So my last thoughts for you are this. So the last speech that Kennedy ever gave, JFK, was to a group about the space program. And as he was giving that speech, he was talking about how hard, it's going to be hard, right? It's not going to be easy to get to space. It's not going to be easy to get to the moon. It's going to be hard, but it's worth it. And he delivered a great piece of messaging as part of that. He told a story. He said, I was talking recently, and imagine this in Kennedy's voice, right? I can't do the accent. But he said, I was talking recently to a friend of mine, an Irish writer named Frank O'Connor. And Frank O'Connor told me this story of these Irish brothers who used to go on these adventures across the countryside, right? They'd head in a direction, they'd walk as far as they can. And it seemed almost inevitably, at some point, they would get to an orchard wall that was too high to pass, too high to climb. And they faced a choice, right? They could turn back, or they could figure out, how to get over that wall. And so what they would do is at that moment, when they were at that wall that was too high to climb, is they would take their caps and they would throw them over the wall. And now they had no choice but to figure out a way to scale it. And then they could continue their adventure. And he said, today what you need to know is the U.S. has thrown our cap over the wall. We have decided that we are going to go to the moon, and we're going to do it. We don't know how, and it's not going to be easy, but we're going to work together. We're going to scale that wall. We're going to get to the moon. 2 days later, one of the great tragedies in U.S. history, Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. But his message lived on. And 6 years later, we put a person on the moon. And the next day, as magazine writers and headline writers had to think about how do I properly capture this moment, it seemed that almost all of them landed on the same phrasing. Mr. President, we got your cap. And I think about that in the context of he had this thing he wanted to rally people around. You guys heard me say that messaging is an act of leadership, right? He led through his messaging and caused a country to rally. And even after his passing, 6 years later, people still remembered, right? The why of it. Remembered why we went and did it. And you're not hearing from me that learning this messaging is as important as getting people on the moon, right? What you are hearing from me is it is important, though. It's important to your jobs, it's important to your organization, it's important to your families. And today you've got a special opportunity. You're with the folks who are all part of the same tribe, who all believe messages matter. We're all working through these issues to figure out how do we do this better, better, better. That's what the rest of today is about. So my challenge to you folks is to not just sit there passively, which I don't think you would anyways, but to engage. I'm asking you this morning to commit to getting as good as you can at this. I'm asking you to throw your cap over the wall. And if you'll throw your cap over the wall, I promise the rest of the day we'll all work together to figure out how to get that cap back, because messages matter. Thank you, folks.